marked 4 years since medical cannabis was legalized in the UK. But according to new figures out today, a third of police officers are unaware that cannabis on prescription exists. In fact, the majority say their training on laws around medical cannabis has been inadequate to non-existent. This research follows a number of reports highlighting patients who've had their prescribed cannabis unjustly seized. Well, I'm joined now by Dr. Simon Erridge, Head of Research and Access at Sapphire Medical Clinics. Good evening to you, Simon.
Good evening, Kate. Thanks for having me on.
And Ryan, who takes medicinal cannabis up to 12 times a day due to his ADHD and severe migraines. Good evening, Ryan.
Good evening, Kate. It's a pleasure.
Ryan, tell me about your experience of taking medical cannabis. How much of a difference has it made to you?
So I find that through suffering with ADHD and having quite a chaotic day-to-day routine as a result, struggling to pick a task up and put it down again and then move on to the next thing, or finish things up first and then move on. It can be quite difficult to manage in daily life. So having a medication that works well is absolutely essential for somebody that suffers with ADHD. But unfortunately, a lot of the ones that are used as first line treatments can come with some really bad side effects, and that was the case for me. I struggled with my appetite and would often find that while it worked well for, say, half an hour or two at a time, there'd be parts of the day where I'd actually see no benefit from the regular medication. And I tend to find that, going through cannabis treatment has been more consistent, to be honest, than the tablet-based options that I had before.
So how do you take your medical cannabis at the moment?
So I use a vaporizer device. This is a handheld one where you place the cannabis in a chamber here in its herbal form, just like you'd see from street deals or the illegal drug market. It goes in here and you turn it on with this button on the top. It takes about a minute or two to heat up to its temperature, and then you inhale out of it as you would with a cigarette or a vaporizer.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me what happened to you. Why were the police called, and what did they do to your medical supply of cannabis?
So, dating back to about December of 2021, I received a complaint from the council stating that there was some concerns about me using cannabis from the neighbours, specifically that they could smell it. This arose after an unrelated disagreement with the neighbour. So I think it was partly because they had some knowledge that I used cannabis and they weren't themselves convinced that it was actually legitimate that they were reporting that to the police. I had a few visits later in around February and March time from the police, coming to the door to give me words of advice to say you shouldn't really be smoking, especially if it's causing nuisance to your neighbours, which I don't believe it was. And we had an inspection from a council officer who actually sat in while I used my vape and agreed that it shouldn't cause much of a problem, at least not for long after it's been used. From there, in April, I had a visit following a call I've made to the police saying that I'd like for them to come and, verify or check up on the paperwork that I'd sent to them by email already to confirm that it was in fact prescribed, and then possibly give words to advice to anybody that complained going forward. They visited me around the 26th or 24th of that month to seize the cannabis.
So you'd contacted them to check in with them, make sure that they had the proper paperwork, make sure that everything was fine, and instead they came to your house and seized the cannabis instead. What grounds did they have for seizing it? I mean, presumably you'd already shown them proof of the prescription, perhaps a doctor's note. You thought that you'd shown them enough proof, basically.
Absolutely, Kate. So they'd seen the label from the medication, and I offered up my ID, which I was having trouble finding on the day. So I did say I might have trouble finding this, but I'll look around the flat for you. They spent about an hour and 10 minutes with me during the incident. I showed them the medication label and my photo ID, which is, as far as the legal basis is concerned, all that's really required for a prescription patient to prove that they have a prescription. There is another element where patients are expected to have possession of the FP10 form that doctors use to prescribe this medication, but that's actually something that tends to be sent directly from the clinic to a pharmacy, and then the pharmacy will provide a copy of it. So usually a patient wouldn't have the original master document there anyway.
Okay. And they seized your cannabis, and what happened when you tried to get it back?
I should also highlight that in the case of Norfolk Police specifically, they actually have a policy that's influenced by an organisation called CanCard, who provide an identity card for those that have medical conditions that they are treating themselves with cannabis, be it prescribed or otherwise.
Okay.
Generally, it's used by people that haven't actually been able to access a prescription, either because it's been too expensive for them, or because they're potentially using it for a condition that's not yet covered by certain clinics and might not be available.
So there's another means of proof there. But the police came to your house, seized your medical grade cannabis, which meant that you were without your medication. Anyone who takes medication for anything currently listening to this show would understand that when that medication is essential for you to live a fairly normal existence, that is absolutely paramount. It's paramount that you have your medication. Yours was seized for a fortnight, I understand, Ryan.
That's correct.
How did you come to get it back? Did the police sort of apologise and return it to you?
So I haven't had a formal apology. I've had some calls from officers that were involved in the case, saying, we've made some errors here. When we tried to find you on a system with CanCard, again, I should point out that this CanCard is not actually a requirement for prescription patients. It's just an option available to prove that you've got medical conditions that benefit from cannabis. They rung CanCard on the phone. And one of the officers that dealt with it had told me that what happened there is that they'd relayed the spelling of my surname incorrectly to CanCard, which meant that at the time they'd looked into that, it appeared as if I didn't have one. And with that being the thing that Norfolk Police as a policy look for, despite having no legal basis, they took the view that they should seize it from there.
Yeah. So
what I think's concerning, because going back to what you said just now, it's people shouldn't be deprived of essential medications, and as you'll know, with any medication, be it for insulin or regular painkillers, they all come with the same labels on the bottles. And in the case of a cannabis prescription, like we have here, it's very much the same sort of labeling. I'll try to cover my details up here. There we go. So I've got my finger over my name.
Yeah.
Well, my name, you said my name anyway. It's no need to cover anything up.
Because we're on the radio, Ryan, we have no danger of seeing your labels. So you're absolutely fine. But the point you're making is that it looks like a standard prescription label. It is and basically should be believable. Let me bring in Dr. Simon Eridge here just to sort of sum up whether this is an unusual story or not, Simon. Is this happening all over the UK?
I think, thankfully, in Ryan's case, at this very extreme end, thankfully there have been some other occasions where we know this to have happened, but actually to be at this very extreme end, we know to be relatively rare out of the 20,000 patients who are prescribed medical cannabis in the UK. But, there is still a lot of confusion and from police officers, and that was highlighted in the survey in that, 66% had either had no training or what they thought to be inadequate training on medical cannabis.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, 90% of those would welcome further education on the topic. So I think that's really important. I think it's, I don't envy police officers. They have a really difficult job to do, but it's about making sure that we get that education to them so that they can make the right decisions when they encounter patients.
Sure. So it's not that the police are being deliberately disruptive. It's just that many are not aware that medical cannabis exists and that people are taking it readily, and it's been in existence since 2018. And of course, its use is probably even more common as the years go by. So you're asking really, appealing, Dr. Simon Eridge, for police forces to be educated in this, that there needs to be some sort of provision so that the police are not needlessly, I guess, wasting taxpayers' money, taking away, seizing cannabis used for medical use, legitimate use.
Yeah, and I think, I wouldn't believe that any police officers would want to be in a situation where they're taking away a vital medication from an individual. And I don't think anyone wants to be in that situation. And we've been really forthcoming with the police in Scotland. After there was an incident up in Scotland, we had some very open dialogue with them in terms of providing education, both to police forces. Then we also spoke at the medical cannabis group that they have there, which combines members of Scottish Parliament and MPs who are from Scotland. And we've also now written to the National Police Chiefs Council again to offer free education to any police force that wants to take us up on the offer.
Yeah, well, I hope they do, Simon. Thank you so much for speaking to us on the show tonight. Our time has sadly come to an end, but thank you to both of you. The voice you've just been hearing there is Dr. Simon Eridge, Head of Research and Access at Sapphire Medical Clinics. And Ryan, we heard from earlier, who had his medicinal cannabis taken a short while ago. It's now been returned, thankfully, but I think that just highlights some of the issues here. Thank you to both of you for joining us on Times Radio. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, when we come back, we're going to take a peek inside tomorrow's paper.
Mariella Foster on Times.
Thank you both so much.